He's back. Steph Curry sets a new NBA record in his return. Does anyone have a plan to stop the two-time MVP? Get ready to kiss some bricks. The 100th running of the Indianapolis 500 is almost here. We'll chat with IndyCar driver Graham Rahal. And the master storyteller, Vin Scully, shares his thoughts on a lifetime in baseball. This is SI Now. Hey there, welcome to SI Now. It is Tuesday, May 10th, and I'm Maggie Gray. When Michael Jordan announced he was returning to basketball in 1995, he did it with a fax that simply said, "I'm back." On Monday night, Steph Curry copped the phrase, repeatedly reminding the crowd in Portland that he too was back. And they got the message. No fax needed. SI NBA writer Ben Golliver now joins me with more on Steph's return. And Ben, Curry dropped 40 points in Game 4, including 17 in overtime, which is an NBA record. He chipped in 9 rebounds and dished out 8 assists. And that is today's adrenaline performance presented by Toyota. Let's go places. And Ben, we just learned that Steph Curry has been voted the NBA's MVP by unanimous decision. Of all the accolades he's received, what does this one mean?
Well, it's by far the best honor that anyone really could have when you think back. Michael Jordan's never done it. LeBron James has never done it. You just go right down the list. For him to have the complete respect of the media voting panel, that says a lot because, look, everyone's out there ready to tear down whoever is the current king of the league, and clearly everyone agreed there was no holes in his resume, and he completely deserved it. I mean, he had the best shooting season in NBA history. He had the best 50, 40, 90 shooting season in NBA history. He led the Warriors to a record 73 wins. You just go right down the list. He was clearly the MVP this year, and I was actually glad to see him nominated in unanimous fashion.
Yeah. What did you notice about the team's mentality last night when Steph Curry took the floor?
Well, by the end of it, you saw they were jumping up and down almost like props, supporting actors. They were glad to hop on his shoulders and glad to punch his chest. I mean, they were so happy that he was back. I think early in the game, when he came off the bench, that's very unusual. He never comes off the bench, obviously. There was a lot of standing around and wondering, hey, when's Steph going to come in? And that's why they got into that huge early lead. And I think as soon as he got back on the court, and especially once he started to get into rhythm, he wasn't necessarily hitting his outside shots early, but he was finding ways to get to mid-range jumpers. He was doing a really nice job running pick and rolls and finding Golden State shooters. Once he was sort of back in the flow, you could just see the momentum growing and growing and growing. And by the time the outburst that you mentioned, 17 points in the overtime period, took place, all of his teammates were just ecstatic, overwhelmed. And, Draymond Green was left so cocky on the post-game podium talking about how great it was to clear out the Moda Center early before the buzzer, sending the fans home. They kind of felt like, that's what they're used to with Steph Curry, kind of impressing road crowds and claiming tough victories on the road. So all of those things came together in a really special night for Steph Curry.
That's not all Draymond Green said. Here he is talking about the Portland Trailblazers.
Do I think they're done? Of course I think they're done. If I don't think they're done, then I don't know who else is going to think it.
That was Draymond Green. The momentum, Ben, clearly back in Golden State's favor. They have a 3-1 series lead and go into their home court. Now, okay, let's talk strategy. Should Steve Kerr think about limiting Steph's minutes to avoid risking a setback with his knee?
Well, I think that they're going to be in position, given the momentum and coming off of that kind of a big win with Steph back, with this MVP announcement, and now returning home. I mean, you should be in position to easily win that Game 5, and you should be able to deliver on the promise that Draymond Green made. And remember, this is his second straight promise because he guaranteed a win in Game 4, and they got it just barely thanks to Steph. So he was riding high and probably feeling a little bit lucky after he put himself out there like that. But I think, the rest is going to come for them in between series because you've got, another Western Conference bracket matchup between Oklahoma City and San Antonio, that's been really tight, really competitive, and will probably go 7 games. If you're Golden State and you close it out in 5, that gives you a nice chunk to get Steph Curry all the rest he needs. If I'm the Warriors coaching staff, I feel comfortable playing him 30, 35 minutes in Game 5 if that means closing it out for sure, just because you've got the time waiting there for you afterwards.
Yeah, we had heard during the game from David Aldridge that Curry was only supposed to play about 20 to 25 minutes. And, of course, after Sean Livingston got ejected in the second quarter, well, Curry was forced to play a whole lot more, over 30 minutes in that game. Looking forward now, you mentioned the Thunder and the Spurs. That's a great series. We expect it to go the distance. It's currently tied at 2 games apiece. Which team would you give the Warriors the most trouble in the Western Conference Finals?
I really think it's still the Spurs. I felt that all season long. I mean, they can do a number of things to really challenge the Warriors. They've got excellent perimeter defenders. They've got excellent length out there. They have a very cohesive defensive scheme. They're able to play both big and small, which is important because Golden State has used, really traditional looks with centers. They've also, and they've all talent. I mean, guys like Kawhi Leonard, those are big-time star players who've been playing like it during the postseason. All of those things put together make them a really tough squad. To me, Oklahoma City's had a really nice playoffs, actually better than I expected. But you still wonder, is their defense cohesive enough, and are they too reliant upon their 2-star players for points? So for me, the dream matchup for all basketball fans remains Warriors versus Spurs. We didn't get that matchup last year in the playoffs, and it was kind of the one regret that a lot of people had. We weren't able to see that. Shakeout, student versus teacher, Greg Popovich versus Steve Kerr. That's the one that I want to see, and I think we're headed that way.
Storylines abound. If it is indeed Warriors and Spurs, it will be a fun one. Meanwhile, a lot of basketball still to play. Ben Golliver, thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure.
Okay, coming up, he has been the soundtrack of baseball for nearly 70 years. Dodgers broadcaster Vin Scully chats with our own Tom Verducci in an exclusive SI Now video interview. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to SI Now. Steven Strasburg is a very rich young man. The righty who came into the majors throwing 100 miles per hour signed a 7-year extension with the Washington Nationals that will take him to his 34th birthday. It will also reportedly pay him $175 million. SI senior writer Tom Verducci joins us now. Tom, how do you see this transaction? Now, considering the going rate for starting pitchers, did Strasburg give the Nats a deal?
In some way he did, but let's remember he can also opt out of this contract after 3 or 4 years. So I think that's a key for both parties in this case. I think it's a $175 million risk in 2 regards. Number one, the Nationals are banking that his rebuilt elbow, he had Tommy John surgery in 2010, is going to hold up for a total of 13 years. They've secured his services until age 35. And the other thing is they're basically laying $175 million to try to win the World Series in the next 2 or 3 years while Bryce Harper is there. After that, well, maybe all bets are off. Maybe Strasburg leaves, maybe Harper leaves. But it's certainly a lot of money to give someone who's had Tommy John surgery, who doesn't really have clean mechanics, and who's pitched 180 innings only twice so far in his career.
So you see this as more risk than the reward, at least where we stand here on this Tuesday. You mentioned Harper. We should talk about him because the reigning NL MVP was ejected last night for arguing a strike call from the bench. And then when he came out to celebrate when Clint Robinson hit a walk-off home run, he cursed out umpire Brian Knight. Now, Tom, just a few weeks ago, Harper was at the center of a controversy for saying that baseball was tired, and it sparked a old school versus new school debate. So will cursing out the umpire cause another wave of criticism for Harper?
Well, I think it may cause him to have a little bit lighter wallet. I expect he will get fined. We saw John Farrell come on the field with David Ortiz after Farrell had been ejected. He was fined. I don't like it, to be honest with you. I mean, I'm all for the emotion. I'm all for making the game fun, and he certainly is, if not the most fun guy to watch play, certainly one of them because he brings the intensity every night. But in this case, your team has won the game. Don't make the umpire the priority, which is what he did after the walk-off home run. As I said, I think after being ejected and coming on the field and cursing at an umpire, I would be shocked if MLB doesn't suspend him. At least fine him. I don't think he'll be suspended. On the other hand, it's not like it's a felony in baseball terms. Again, I love the intensity. He owned up to it immediately after the game. He actually said he expects to be fined. Not a huge deal, but it just one more piece of evidence why this guy is must-watch TV out of all the players in baseball. He creates the most attention.
And I wonder if somehow this might actually bridge the gap between the old school guys like Goose Gossage, who was very critical of Harper, called him a punk. If he may have a little more respect for him now, because it's timeless to be arguing with an umpire. That goes back all the way to when Vin Scully first took over as the Dodgers broadcaster. You've written about a man who has been the soundtrack for baseball for nearly 70 years, and this is his final season. But Tom, this is not like Derek Jeter or Mariano Rivera's farewell tours. Scully seems genuinely put off by the attention and the accolades that he's receiving throughout the season. Does he realize what he's meant to the game of baseball and its fans?
I think Vin must realize that, because I'm sure not a day goes by where someone doesn't let him know how much he has touched their lives or their families' lives. And I'm talking about generationally. So I think it's inescapable. At the same time, it's very hard for me to think of anybody who combines greatness with humility the way that Vin Scully has done. I mean, he's done nothing but get bigger and bigger, even though obviously he's an icon in Los Angeles. But to me, he's a true national treasure, not just to the game of baseball, but to America. And yet at the same time, with that kind of respect, that kind of profile, Vin said it best himself. He's uncomfortable with the attention. His goal as a broadcaster, actually two of them. One was to never make a big mistake. And the second was to never put himself in front of the game and the players. And he never has, as great as he has been. And I think even in this last season, I do think he's a little bit uncomfortable with something of a farewell tour. But the less attention to him, I think, the happier he is. Keep the attention on the game.
Scully admits that he doesn't watch much baseball outside of the broadcast booth, and he has a wide variety of interests outside the game. Tom, how much does he credit his longevity to having that type of range?
Well, I think that's a big part of it. He's not living and dying with baseball when he's not at the ballpark. He has a lot of other interests. He's a voracious reader. He loves Broadway musicals, loves all kinds of music, actually. And he's obviously a very well-read person. So it's not as if he's living and dying with baseball. At the same time, I am astounded that he has kept his enthusiasm for the game and the broadcast as if he's a rookie broadcaster. The way he prepares for games is just incredible. And he told me, I asked him where that enthusiasm came from, and he said just really wanting to learn things and share with people just information about the game and the people who play the game. He gets excited about it when he wakes up in the morning. He'll start looking things up, things that he can bring to a broadcast. So he does love the game, but he loves the job, and I think he loves just being people's friend and passing along information more than he does the nuts and bolts of the game.
Yeah, and he has such a unique style. And Tom, after being in the broadcast booth yourself, do broadcasters, aside from Vin Scully, have the ability to ad-lib to the degree it appears that Scully is ad-libbing?
No. Nobody. Listen, he's earned the right to do a broadcast in a very unique manner. There's nobody else who broadcasts the game either locally or nationally who has the reign and breadth that Vin Scully does. The game actually is directed and produced, not just broadcast by Vin Scully. He will let the producers and directors know what shots to take, where he's going to go. Obviously, he's working alone, so he's not carving off space for an analyst or a partner. He's really the only one who's earned that, and to me, he's the only one who could pull it off as well. He's his own play-by-play man, and he's his own color guy. I mean, it's almost like a pitcher who's also his own closer, who pitches a complete game every night. He's our Sandy Koufax when it comes to broadcasters.
Absolutely. And of course, this story, your story about Scully, is the cover of Sports Illustrated this week. Tom, his storytelling, it's legendary. His timing is perfection. He can just as easily talk about the history of the American flag as a story about Johnny Gomes getting mauled by a wolf. Do you have a favorite story that Scully has told?
Well, mine is a little bit personal because recently, just this year, and I think he's as good as ever. I mean, you can listen to a Scully broadcast from 20, 30, 40, 60 years ago, and he sounds just as good today. So I'm going to stay current, and I know that I had written this story at SI about Madison Bumgarner and his wife who cut a snake in half and nursed the baby rabbit to health that actually was inside the snake. The story was in the Sportsman of the Year piece on Bumgarner a couple of years ago. And when Vin Scully told the story sounded unique. It sounded like nothing else that I had written or anybody else had said after I wrote the piece. He just made it fresh and new. And, you know, the old saying that you could listen to Vin read a grocery list, which he has read, by the way.
Yeah.
It's true when it comes to stories. Words and stories in his hands just rise to a completely different level.
Yeah, well, Tom, something I remember about that story you wrote about Madison Bumgarner was that he once dated a woman whose name was Madison Bumgarner. There's a lot of great storytelling going on there. Tom Verducci, thank you so much. We appreciate your time and a great piece here with Vin Scully.
Thanks so much, Maggie.
All right. Now here is part one of SI Now's exclusive interview between Tom Verducci and Hall of Fame broadcaster Vin Scully.
It's time for Dodger baseball.
They call him Billy No-No. The no-no is because of the way he runs. When Bill Singer runs, his head shakes from side to side, and Don Drysdale once said, "Here comes Billy No-No."
The words eloquentia perfecta, expressing yourself very humanely, perfectly, if you will, but also, you know, the root of that is a humility, where you are appealing to the audience. You know the audience's needs and desires rather than your own. To me, that seems to personify what you do as a broadcaster. Do you see some of that?
I guess my biggest fear ever since I started, besides the fear of making some big mistake, I always wanted to make sure I could push the game and the players rather than me. I was just the voice talking about them.
Henry Aaron has eclipsed the mark set by Babe Ruth.
Sandy Koufax did it with a flourish.
Loretta gets one into left center. It's going to fall. Dodgers win it 3-2.
I'm very uncomfortable this year, being my last year, and the media, the ball club, they have a tendency to push me out before the game. I'm in front, and I'm uncomfortable with that.
It's too much about you.
Yes, exactly. I like to tell stories. One in a blue story might involve me, but the players, they're the ones, and that's what I've tried to do. Yeah.
Mike Davis, by the way, has stolen 7 out of 10. If you're wondering about Lasorda throwing the dice again.
And the listener, do you have someone in mind? Because it always seems like your relationship with your audience is a friendship. As if you're talking to a friend, they're listening to a friend.
I don't want to make a big deal out of it. I mean, you and I have been friends a long time.
I think when I first started, I tried to make believe I was in the ballpark, sitting next to somebody, and just talking. And if you go to a ball game and you sit there, you're not going to talk pitches for 3 hours. You know, there's a running conversation, not necessarily the game. So that's all a part of what I try to do, as if I'm talking to a friend, yeah.
Opening day, 1950, your first game with the Brooklyn Dodgers. You were what, 23, 24 years old?
Yeah,
Anything stand out to you about that day?
Yeah, I was absolutely scared to death. But, you know, we had a great chemistry in the booth. I don't think we'll ever see it again. Red Barber was the father. Connie Desmond was the older brother, and I was the kid. Red didn't look at me as just another announcer. I was kind of the son he never had, I think. Because of that, he really cared. So in caring, it also meant he'd be critical. And in those early days, anything he said that was negative towards me, it really hurt. And then Big Brother Connie would say, "That's all right, Vin, that's fine." And that chemistry was incredible. But with all of that, there I am sitting in Philadelphia, and it hit me after spring training. I'm doing a game. I mean, this is for real now, you know, and I've got Red here and Connie there. And so I would just say overwhelmed by circumstance, barely keeping my head above emotion, and surviving somehow, you know.
Good evening, everybody. And despite the fact that I have just knocked a cup of coffee in my lap and a suit that's just out of the cleaners, it's great to be home.
Put me back into Ebbets Field, if you will, because obviously a lot of today's fans, they read about it, they know it historically, but they don't really know the feel of the ballpark. Paint for me, you know, the sights, the sounds, even the smells of that little diamond in Flatbush.
Well, first of all, to the people today, they see big stadiums or carefully architecturally designed to hold 40,000. Ebbets Field was just a small ballpark, and you were very aware of the voices. There was a very colorful lady, Hilda Chester, her name was. And Hilda started out very famous in center field, and she carried a big cowbell. And whatever the Dodgers did, she'd ring the cowbell, and you were aware of her presence, very much so. And my first year, I'm there, and it's a quiet Saturday afternoon with a few thousand people. And I'm sitting next to Red Barber, and all of a sudden, this booming voice came out loud and clear, and it was Hilda. And she hollered, "Vin Scully, I love you." And the crowd laughed, and I kind of lowered my head. I was embarrassed. And with my head down, she said, "Look at me when I'm talking to you." And the crowd went bananas. And that could not happen today, and that's why I bring it up. There was an intimacy with the crowd. Today's ballparks, the crowds are like wallpaper. They make sounds, but you're not rare of individuals. So that to me is the biggest single difference between modern day baseball, big stadia, and then little Ebbets Field. You know?
Yeah, and there was an intimacy with the team as well.
Oh, very much so. Of course, I was much younger then, and I was really part of them, even though I wasn't a player. I would sit in the back of the bus with Dick Williams, who was a young outfielder. We used to have hysterical times laughing. Dick Williams winds up in the Hall of Fame as a manager. You know, you think, oh boy, that's a change for somebody.
Didn't see that coming.
No, didn't see that coming. But it was great. I guess it was about 10 years ago, maybe that was the time. The players called me Mister. Hi, Mr. Scully. And all of a sudden I realized that's a long time ago from sitting in the back of the bus. And after that, with my schedule and TV and radio, I just don't get down to know them well enough. I don't travel with them anymore. So the Mister was the sign that, okay, it's changed. It's not the way it was.
Vin Scully is truly a legend, and be sure to watch part 2 of this exclusive SI Now interview on tomorrow's show, and you can read Tom's feature story about Vin in this week's issue of Sports Illustrated. We'll be right back with IndyCar driver Graham Rahal. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to SI Now. It's the one time where milk is the perfect choice. pucker up because the 100th running of the Indianapolis 500 is less than 3 weeks away. And I'm pleased to be joined by driver Graham Rahal of Rahal, Letterman, and Lanigan team. Graham, thanks so much for being here.
Absolutely.
You know, there's a lot of sentimentality around this race. It's the 100th running. It's the 30th anniversary since your father won the Indianapolis 500, Bobby Rahal. Do you have the luxury of thinking about that kind of stuff as you're preparing for the race?
I mean, a little bit, a little bit. Obviously, today I've been talking a lot about it, and we have been, for a long time. There's been so much build-up, coming into this month. Talking about the 100th, talking about 30 years since Dad won. We've had a lot of sponsors on board. We brought Budweiser's back on board. Budweiser sponsored my dad in '86 when he won. So there's been a lot of I would say
reminders,
common synergies or whatever you want to say that are man. I don't know. And through my career, as I look back, Mid-Ohio, I won last year, which was 30 years after Dad. My Daytona 24-hour victory was 30 years after Dad. My Formula Atlantic Championship was 30 years after Dad. So it's these 30-year things that just keep reminding me over time and time again, And so I've thought about it a bit, but the truth is you got to get to the track, got to get to work. And hopefully we got a chance.
Yeah, it's so interesting because obviously you go into the family business, you know that the comparisons are going to be there.
Absolutely.
And now we're here and it is 30 years later. As we're preparing for the Indy 500 last year, we saw cars going up to 250 miles per hour. They were going airborne. It was insane. What has the series done to try to keep you guys safe?
Yeah, we've done some stuff. They've added a couple parts and pieces to try to stop this sort of thing from happening. It was interesting last year. The cars that had this issue with going over were all Chevys, and in the Honda, which I drive, we didn't have. We had a couple guys crash, but we didn't have any really instances to even try or test this out, right? So we took a lot of safety precautions from there. Luckily, everybody was okay. All the accidents, there were no problems. But it's scary for sure. And this year we've got a dome skid underneath the car, which should, in the instance that you spin sideways, should slow down the speed in which the car will roll over. We also have these new little panels on the back of the rear bumper beam that will flip up. So if you get backwards, these panels come up and should create downforce and bring the cars down. So we'll see. At the end of the day, it's Oval racing. You're always talking risk versus reward. It's a risky business. We get that. Certain guys, we don't want to accept it, but it's part of the job.
Oh, man. It's hard to watch, though, sometimes as a spectator, which is why we are not the ones who are driving the cars.
Yeah.
We are leaving that up to you. I have to ask you about this story that's kind of floating around where the Chevy drivers, as they're doing testing at Indy, maybe intentionally slowing their cars down. Yeah, you've heard of this, obviously.
Yeah.
And in what way could them slowing down their times during testing, what way could that give them an advantage? It's like a golfer lowering their handicap, right? Lying about their handicap.
It is, but if this were the case, and let's be clear, nobody can prove it, but if this were the case, they would still get all the aerodynamic data that they needed, which we were there testing for. They would have reduced the horsepower, so you wouldn't have seen, the speeds on the straightaways. But they're also trying to show that, because there's been a big discussion, Honda versus Chevrolet, which one is faster and all these sort of things, and is Honda behind, which we have been, but maybe we've caught up now aerodynamically. And so people are saying, well, if that's the case, the speeds in testing don't show it. Well, the problem is the speeds in testing might not be 100% accurate, and so as we're lobbying with the series and everything else to maybe get some help, what Chevy's doing, or what they could be doing in that case, is showing that they don't have an advantage, or trying to prove that and to lobby against us. But the truth is, none of us can prove that that's the case. None of us know that they were actually sandbagging or not, and it really doesn't matter. I mean, what I say to my guys, and we've led the charge for Honda the last 2 years, I say to my guys week in, week out, do our jobs, focus on what we can control, do the best we can, maximize the potential, and we'll be fine. And that's really all we can do. We could sit and talk about it all day long and get nothing accomplished, but that's the truth.
It's very interesting, especially because Marco Andretti said it was blatant. He thinks that it's blatant. Now, you're saying you don't think it can be proven.
It's hard to prove.
Yeah.
It'd be very hard to prove. I mean, he can say it's blatant. If I look at the speeds from where we were last year to where we were this year, even the Hondas were considerably slower, in testing. And again, it was a bad day. It was cold. It was windy, extremely 40, 50 mile an hour winds, which are not not good to drive in. So it's hard to even look at the times and really compare them. But, we've got the Grand Prix of Indianapolis this weekend. Then Monday, we go and we'll go right onto the oval. We're going to find out soon where we stack up.
Okay, I have to ask you also about maybe a developing rivalry between yourself and Simon Pagenaud, okay? And here's something that you admitted recently after he edged you out in Alabama.
Yeah.
He finished 1, you finished 2. You admitted, this is your quote, "He's in my head and I don't want to lose to Simon." What has he done that's particularly upset you?
No, he doesn't. He doesn't upset me. In fact, I get along well with Simon overall. But the truth of the matter is, I'm a competitive guy. I've raced against Simon a long time, and he's just a guy I enjoy beating. You just have these rivalries. Are guys you go head to head with, and you want to beat them.
So how's he in your head?
Well, I feel like that quote was maybe cut off a little bit because I don't think he's not in my head in that sense. It's more just I'm a competitive guy. He's somebody I grew up racing against, and now he goes to Team Penske, which is the best team. And he's a guy that I set the standard like that I want to beat him. And we lost to him in Alabama. And what was frustrating there, why I was upset is because really, frankly, we lost that race because of my own fault. I clipped the rear or the front wing on the car in front when we were coming 5 laps to go or something. Had we cleared that car, we had the race won. And so that's why I was disappointed. Was, frankly, it's difficult when you give yourself the opportunity, you need to maximize it.
Of course, and Pagenaud, though, has become kind of a polarizing guy, especially after he crossed the blend line at the pit stop in Long Beach, and it really cost Scott Dixon to lose the race. I mean, that's cheating. Do you see him as a guy who bends the rules?
I don't know that he is as an individual himself. A lot of guys like you see there, you're supposed to keep 2 tires to the right side of the blend line. He clearly crossed it. It's pretty obvious. But the thing is, if you look at it, they said on that particular day there would have been 14 penalties for that exact call. Which, if you ask me, then you got to give out 14 penalties because I wasn't one of the 14. So for me,
the rules are the rules.
Yeah, the rules are the rules. But unfortunately, they didn't. He got away with it, and went on to win the race and start 2 in a row. He is our points leader right now, so we are all aiming for him. I mean, for sure, it's my job to make sure that in our Steak and Shake Honda we beat him this weekend. There's no other way around that. And then we go into the 500. Build up for that. He's with Penske. Penske pretty much has won, I think, of the 100 runnings. I think they've won 15 of them.
They're powerful.
So they've got a lot of victories under their belt. But we'll be okay.
Yeah. All right. Speaking of owners, very famous owner that's on your team is David Letterman. He's retired now from the show business and from the late night talk show circuit. And we noticed that now that he's not on TV, Graham, he's sporting a new look.
Yeah, he's got this
Can you explain that to us?
He's got this heavy beard going on, the big beard and kind of shaving his head, which I showed up at my dad's office the other day. My dad had a fully bald head too, which I'd never seen him do. But I don't know. Dave, he's got this new look going. He likes it. We got a couple guys on our team that my dad's like, hey, guys, beards, got to cut them down a little bit. And Dave comes in, beards are great. You guys are good. No need to shave. So now it's like, Dad got overruled. But, Dave's a big part of our team. In fact, our Steak and Shake deal, our sponsorship deal, was started really because at Ed Sullivan Theater right over here, there's a Steak and Shake now next door. And Dave was a frequent visitor there, but also as a kid. And so he's the one who kind of went out and chased the sponsorship for us. So we are seeing him more. And obviously that's a case of he's getting more involved finally, which is cool.
How much Steak and Shake is getting in that beard?
Probably a lot.
Probably a lot.
The
steak and the shake, both in the beard.
Although there's not a Steak and Shake in St. Bart's or wherever it was, like the photo that was taken of him. So maybe he's going to have to put one in, become a franchisee.
Why not? Amazing. Well, Graham, listen, we wish you all the best of luck.
Thank
Indy
you.
Grand Prix, of course, this weekend. Indianapolis 500, the 100th running is, less than 3 weeks away. Can't wait for it.
It's going to be awesome.
Graham, thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, and that's going to do it for this Tuesday edition of SI Now. We'll be back tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern with Hall of Fame quarterback Joe Montana and part 2 of our exclusive interview with Vin Scully. But until then, you can keep up with all the latest sports news on SI.com. And don't forget to follow us on Twitter at SI Now Live. We'll see you tomorrow.